Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. Nahmaduhu wa nusalli ala Rasulihil Kareem, amma ba'd. In today's Taraweeh, Maulana Zakaria Sahib, or Imam, he recited the verse, وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ. Lovely verse of the Quran. Just to be, as a reminder, today's Taraweeh, alhamdulillah, we've completed Surah Al-A'raf. And mashallah, we have to give praise to Allah. Allah has granted us this tawfiq and the ability that we can stand in Taraweeh. You know, the section that Maulana Zakaria Sahib had to read today, that's a very difficult section. The last quarter of the 8th juz, because there are many repetitions that come in, or many verses that come in other places of the Quran. And then the first quarter of the 9th as well, and the second quarter of the 9th as well, they are quite difficult. But subhanAllah, may Allah Ta'ala preserve or respect Maulana Zakaria Sahib and increase him in his ilm and amal and knowledge and his faith, and bestow and rain down upon him his mercies and blessings and grant him all goodness. MashaAllah, he read without any jijak, as we say in Urdu, any stop, any pause, any just read. MashaAllah, beautiful. May Allah Ta'ala reward Maulana. So one of the verses that Maulana recited is وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ آمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا لَفَتَحْنَا عَلَيْهِمْ بَرَكَاتٍ مِّنَ السَّمَاءِ وَالْأَرْضِ, in which Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says, and had the people of those societies had iman, been faithful, wattaqaw, and had taqwa of Allah, we would have opened up for them the barakat of the heavens and the earth. We would have opened up for them the barakat of the heavens and the earth. There's this word that we always hear, barakat. Barakat, sometimes, we hear, when a person gets married, we make that the masnun dua, barakallahu lak wa baraka alayk wa jama'a baynukuma fi khayr. We make dua for barakat. Sometimes as well, whenever we ask our scholars and our teachers for du'as, they'll say, may Allah bless you, may Allah grant you lots and lots of barakat. But barakat is a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing to obtain. Barakat doesn't necessarily mean that you have a lot, but barakat, in simple terms, that what you have, that is enough for you. That sustains you. That is more than enough for you. So on one hand, it may be a person who has $10,000, but then he is driving, he gets in an accident. Then he has to pay some money there. He has to go and pay some hospital bills. He goes home and something else happened. The fan breaks down and this thing breaks down. And that $10,000 doesn't last him. On the other hand, a person has $1,000. $1,000, but it's barakah filled. And it's going to be barakah filled when the earning is halal. You have to remember that. When the earning is halal, it's going to be barakah filled. And when you don't do anything that contradicts the Sharia, inshallah, it's going to be barakah filled. So a person may have $1,000, but then alhamdulillah, he was driving, he nearly got in an accident, but Allah protected him. He went home, everything is rosy and good. Everything is working perfectly. And that $1,000 stretches him more than any 10,000 or even 100,000 may be able to stretch. So there's just one incident from one of the lives of our pious predecessors that I wish to share with you. It is an incident, this is Maulana Yunus Patel Sahib, Rahimahullah, who is from South Africa. Maulana Rahimahullah was a very great scholar. And in South Africa, mashallah, he was looked up to as one of their seniors. He was also the disciple of Hazrat Hakim Mukhtar Sahib Rahimahullah, one of the great Sufi saints of the recent past. Maulana Rahimahullah, he loved the Haram of Makkah and Medina. And he would always visit for Umrah and Hajj. He passed away after the Maghrib Salah in Masjid al-Haram. Allahu Akbar. In Masjid al-Haram, he passed away. He says the Maghrib Salah had completed, and this was in 2011. So only a few, 12, 13 years ago. In 2011, he passed away. So he had just finished the Maghrib Salah. He was sitting down. He was facing the Kaaba. He was making dua. And his lips were engaged in dhikr. And in this state, Allahu Akbar, in this state, this great scholar of Islam and the son of Islam departed from this world. His janazah salah was performed the following day after the Fajr salah, and he's buried in the blessed land, in the blessed graveyard in Makkatul Mukarramah. So it's mentioned, and he mentioned this tale, that when in 1971, his father-in-law went for Hajj. So he was away for 4 months. Now, mashallah, in those days, people would go for Hajj for a long time. Nowadays, we barely get 2 weeks, right? Um, so he says that whilst he was overseas, he was entrusted to look after the business. So Maulana Rahimahullah says that previously I had no experience in business and running a business. But with the fadl of Allah, I ran it in such a way that it became an example for the townspeople. He says, what I would do is that every day, I would wake up for Fajr Salah, recite Yasin and the other adhkar, and thereafter I would proceed to the shop around 8:30. During business hours, of course, people are coming in, it is very, very busy. He says the Dhuhr Salah was at 1 o'clock. Dhuhr Azan, sorry, the Adhan for Zuhr was at 1 o'clock. So from 12:30, we would start shutting down. So that by 12:45 or 12:50, the last customers would leave so that we could go to the masjid before Adhan. The same we did for Asr Salah. He said after Dhuhr, I would go home for lunch and then return to the shop to continue business. On Fridays, he says I used to travel to other areas. So the shop would remain closed because he used to go and perform the khutbah and salah. He says the shop would remain closed until I return home. On Saturdays now, he says when it was happening like that, the other shop owner said, we got to wait to see what's going to happen on a Saturday because Saturday is very, very busy. He says, Saturday, I did the same thing. Even though it was so busy and people were coming into the shop, but I closed down. Zuhr time before Dhuhr, I ensured I closed. All the other shops would remain open, but I would close. He says, what happened then was people then understood that this store has business hours. So if we have to be there, we have to be there between these specific times. And then they would come. They would come. So then he mentions a very important point. If people know and they understand our principles, then they'll arrange the suit. Why is it that we have to bend and cancel out our principles for other people? Then he says, if there were any items in the shop that he felt were not proper to sell, he would just give them away. He would give them away. If there was anything doubtful, he would give away as well. He says sometimes there were some very, very poor customers. And remember, this is 1970s South Africa, apartheid, right? And when you read the stories of apartheid and how the people were treated, Allahu Akbar. He says people were very poor. And they would come in. He says sometimes they would come to purchase items. When they would open their purses and their wallets, I could see they didn't have anything. And he said I could look at some of them and understood. And I would ask him, okay, how much do you have? How much money do you have? So a person may say, I have 10 rands, whatever the case may be. He said, I would look at the cost. And then I would say, okay, it's 10 rands. 10 rands was a lot in those times. He said, I would still say, okay, you know what? And he said, I would realize that this person was struggling. They had children and they're struggling. So I would say, take it. Take everything and go. He was very generous. He was very generous in this. He said, when this would happen, people were very appreciative of him. And then customers, more and more and more customers started coming in, right? He said other people started to say that Maulana is going to run his father-in-law's business to the ground. He says, no, I was practicing the hadith in which Rasulullah sallallahu alaihi wasallam made dua, rahimahullah, rahimullahu imran, idha ba'a wa idha ishtara. May Allah have mercy on a person who is lenient when selling, when buying, and when seeking repayment. He says, when my father-in-law returned, the other shopkeeper said to him, your son-in-law must have caused you to become bankrupt. The shop was closed more than it was open. So he said, I told my father-in-law, listen, you've just come from a long journey. You relax for 2 or 3 days, and I have all the records here. You can have a look at it after. We'll sit down and we'll go through. He says, after the 2 or 3 days, when my father-in-law sat down with the books and he opened, he actually found that there was an increase of 25 to 30%. There was an increase of 25 to 30%. Wow, amazing. So he says, practically, and I thank Allah for this, That, one is you're saying it from the member, but I had the opportunity to practically show what barakat does and when you have good practices. So it's essential for us in all facets of life as well, that we do what is correct. We do what is correct. And stay away from haram transactions. If you're doing business and we know that there's someone who is needy, you be a little lenient. Allah Ta'ala will make things easy for you as well. And inshallah, what we'll find barakat in our life. Then we'll find the happiness. Then we'll find goodness. And that's why we always pray for each other too, for barakah. May Allah bless us. May Allah grant us barakat. Because when you have that, then inshallah you have everything. وَلَوْ أَنَّ أَهْلَ الْقُرَىٰ وَآمَنُوا وَاتَّقَوْا. So the Quran says, you bring faith and adopt piety. Allah will open up the barakat of the heavens and earth. May Allah make that a reality for all of us. Ameen wa akhir da'wan. Alhamdulillah rabbil alameen.